Mine says 6:30. Good evening. It's 6:30. We call Sawyer County Public Works Committee meeting to order. I'll ask the clerk to call a roll, please.
Ron Kinsley,
There.
Mark Helwig, Randy Newman, Chuck Van Etten, Brian Bissonette.
Let the record indicate we have a quorum. Next item is the Pledge of Allegiance. Please rise to the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Number 4, certification and compliance with open meeting laws.
Let the record show that this meeting has been publicly noticed to the news media as required by Section 19.84 of the Wisconsin statutes.
Thank you. Number 5 is the meeting agenda. The agenda is set. Number 6, Airport Master Plan, Public Information Session number 2. I'm going to hand it over to Andy, and Andy can hand it to Mike.
So at this, to start tonight's meeting, we're going to cover the airport master plan. So we'll have a presentation by Kaufman Associates, who is the consultant that has been working on the master plan. And then when Mike's completed with his presentation, we'll open it up for public comments, question and answer. The consultant can answer questions. The chair should moderate the public comment. And then once that's complete, the committee will discuss and consider the master plan development alternative and potential recommendation to the board. After we complete all the master plan discussion tonight, then we'll move back to our normal agenda and open it back up for public comments on other items and then proceed with the agenda. So I'll turn it over to Mike.
Thanks, Andy. Again, thank you for the opportunity to present to this board. My name is Mike Dimiturko. I am the president of Kaufman Associates. I am an airport planner by trade, been doing this for 30 years now. So I'm thankful for the opportunity to again present. We did this once before in a different type of setting, same location. We have a lot less to talk about tonight than we did the last time. Simply are going to talk through the recommendation as it stands today on the development concept for the airport's master plan, and then talk next steps, and then I think opening for question and answer. Just as a reminder of what we are and what we are not doing, this is an airport master plan. It is a prescribed process that is required by the FAA roughly every 10 years for airports that receive federal grants, which is your airport, the Sawyer County Airport. The FAA basically utilizes this process to do two things, primarily to identify what is currently happening at the airport and to identify the capital needs going forward. This can then be absorbed into their funding mechanism, and that they will then be prepared for requests that you may bring to them in the future. The other part of it is just this, it's the education of the local community about the airport itself, to talk a little bit about what's happening now, what plans are, and what the airport is and is not. We've gone through 2 phases. Previously, our last meeting, we went through phase 2. So up until that point, we were simply presenting information about what we believe the activity that's going on right now, and then also what we expect to happen over the course of the next 20 years. We then moved into alternative development options. As we said, at that point, they were simply options that we wanted to talk about. We presented to the community as well and received some really good feedback. We are now in the phase 3 process. The phase 3 process is not complete. We were very purposeful in, especially given the nature of our last meeting, we wanted to make sure that our recommendation was going to be acceptable to the county before moving forward with the remainder of what we have to do, because we didn't want to have to redo the work twice. We're only scoped to do it once. So we wanted to present to the county to basically provide what we believe should be the recommendation for the course of the next 20 plus years of development at the airport. From this point, we are still draft. I want to be very clear about this. We are draft until we come to the county commission and ask for their approval, adoption, acceptance, however they decide to do that. And that will have a draft final, which will include the final recommendation plus a capital plan and the airport layout plan drawing. All of that will be complete, and then we will put it before the county supervisors. They will then do what they do with adoption. So the community will have, again, another opportunity as provided by the county to speak into this process. As far as what we have done, again, an airport master plan is just a plan. It's nothing more. It is the start of the process of improving your airport, which is, again, a requirement. It's an obligation, and these are words that are not mine. These are the FAA's words that the county has as a responsibility since they own the airport. And there are two things that the FAA is primarily interested in, and they are the approving body, and that is the forecast of aviation demand and the airport layout plan drawing, which is not yet done and will be by Carl and his team as we conclude. The airport forecasts are important because what they're doing is they're outlining the demand, what's happening in your community. And these numbers are important because then they translate to needs on the airport. And there's one substantial change. We talked about it the last time. We're going to go over it here in a minute. But as an aggregate, you're relatively small general aviation airport when you look at just aggregate. When you look at the specifics, it gets a little more interesting. You have 29 based airplanes. We suggest you'll reach about 41 over the course of the next 20 years. You have 2 based jets. We suggest you may get to 5 or so, roughly. As far as what we believe is the most critical element of this plan that is really forcing the hand of what we have to do in our plan is the determination of the airport's critical airplane. The critical aircraft, by definition, is the airplane or grouping of similar airplanes that operate at the airport up to or exceeding 500 annual operations per year. And the reason this is important is because each grouping of airplane has an associated level of safety requirements, parameters, design you must meet to be within FAA's criteria and meet your obligations for grants. So on this exhibit we're showing here, everything on the left side as the airplanes and in the pictures of the airplanes, everything on the left side is A and B aircraft design 1 through 3. Those airplanes have a relatively small safety buffer requirement, whereas the airplanes on the right, again, as far as the general aviation airplanes, not the commercial, those on the right, the C and D airplanes, 1, 2, and 3, require much higher level of safety standards and parameters, as we talked at length about last time. And the reason this is important is because as we identified, these airplanes, as they operate in your community, they can operate, even though you aren't designed for a C and D airplane, you have a runway that is capable of meeting their needs that pilots can operate on safely. What you don't have is what the FAA would recommend as the proper design buffers that will allow for higher levels of safety for these airplanes. So as they operate at your community more, which is completely allowable under all regulations and rules, as soon as they hit 500 operations, you are obligated to enforce or put into place a plan to meet their design parameters. So that is what we have done in our planning, is we've said, how do we meet this design? And again, we had this meeting last it was March, where we heard from the community in many ways about the plans that were developed in our alternatives. From that meeting, we believe that through the work with our subconsultant, Carl, with Derek, with Andy and staff, with tenants, we think a plan that gives us the greatest opportunity to try to meet both the community's needs as to the greatest extent we can, but also meet the needs of the airport, which is the obligation of the sponsor. They have to. So we're trying to meet both in a sensitive manner. We're likely not going to meet everybody's wants and needs, and that's probably not possible anyway. However, we're doing what we can do. This is the representative depiction of the airside improvement that we are recommending. If you remember, we believe that the runway should be lengthened to about 6,000 feet to meet the needs of the operators that are here that could use that length. And by doing so, we shift the runway to the north with the north end of the runway more than 1,000 feet north of where it is now. And it's also then going to be shifted to the east, approximately 400 feet, just under. And we're going to promote the use of the current runway pavement as a parallel taxiway. The entirety of the plan would move the runway itself to the north and to the east, away from Namakagon Lane, away from the river. So again, we're doing our best to do that. In doing so, you will note that the blue areas are delineated wetlands that we know of now. So this is not a simple plan. This is going to definitely require substantial process through the DNR to achieve this, but it is something that we believe is achievable. And again, the goal was to move the runway so that we had greater depth along the current terminal area, which shows here. And as you look at this exhibit, what you're looking at is everything in red would be an airfield pavement, so something an airplane could move on. Everything in blue is a landside pavement, which would be anything an automobile could move on. Everything that is yellow would be a new rooftop. This plan represents about 50 years worth of development opportunity or more. So what we're trying to do is to show you the opportunity that could present if the runway shifts. So what we have is the opportunity, for example, with a runway shift to the east, is we can then use the land north of the terminal itself. I'm struggling here with a cursor, I apologize. Basically, all of what we're showing is hangars in this area here, a lot of dead air. So basically everything on the north side along Airport Road, where we're showing smaller boxes, those hangars are only capable of being built if and when the runway is shifted. If the runway is not shifted and never is shifted, that area is not usable for hangars. It's just simply not enough separation from the taxiway and the runway to be developed on. So as we move to the south, one of the concerns that we had, and we heard again from the community very clearly, that the 9 acres of land to the I guess the most proximate along Namakagon, I'm sorry, struggling here, along Namakagon Lane was concerning to those people that live along that property. So we wanted to see if we could develop an alternative that would stay out of that land as to the greatest extent possible. And I do want to shift and again reiterate that land was purchased with FAA money, with federal money. So while it may show on its deed that the county owns the land, the county is truly the owner of the land, but the FAA is really truly the owner of the land. So all conveyances on that land are federal. So, we've heard some issues around locally that there's, can we rezone this property? Can we change it so that it not be usable for aviation? And the answer in short from the FAA's perspective would be no. And that's based on federal law. That is based on many, many, many case studies. So in fact, the county really, if they even went to a position where they zoned it different, like say residential to which it couldn't be used, the FAA would likely injunct that option and make a federal action out of it. And so our recommendation is if we can do something in the short term, because we are right now, the airport has literally no space to develop. And it has a substantial amount of people who want to build hangars. So our goal was, how do we get short-term development without using the 9 acres? Because that truly is the only place of substantial area on the airport to develop right now. So the only option that we came back to was the area along Hospital and Airport, which we're showing, which is west of the terminal building itself in Jack Link's hangar. And if that land could be acquired in a way to be developed in this manner, it would require a modification of Airport Road. We're suggesting the best course of action would be to close it. However, if that were not possible, at least in the short term, it could be modified around that development. This would be a short-term solution to give a lot of hangar space without having to go into the 9 acres. That would then bridge the potential for the shift of the runway, which would then open up so much property that you would likely not need that 9 acres for a long time. So I think what this alternative does is it really truly tries to strike that compromise. It might be a poor choice of words, but it's as close as we can get to follow federal rules, regulations, obligations, and also try to hear what the community had to say about development. And so that's why we show this. Ultimately, I want to be also clear. It was recommended that we speak straight. If that runway does not move, the 9 acres will be in play for development. It is not prohibitive, and that the FAA would promote that property if you have a development that wants to be here as an aviation operator, and that is the only thing available, and they ask for it, you say no, the FAA then is engaged, you may be forced to allow it to happen. So the goal here is to try to give you an option to not have to do that, but also then provide a long-term solution that would try to not also get into that area, but also promote along the runway environment, which is better anyway. It's closer to the runway. It's a shorter taxi time. It's a better alignment. And in this case, you may never, ever need to use the 9 acres for development ever. And that would be, of all things, I think the best case for everybody that's here and interested. And so that's the reason we came up with this plan. I think that again, while it may not be perfect, it certainly does meet the need as we present. It would meet the FAA's goals and objectives as far as it needs from this facility, which again is obligated to them. And so I think that could be the best of all worlds. And again, well, I'm sure we'll hear more from the community on this, but that is what we propose at present. We also did indicate the last time we will look at environmental factors. We did not do an environmental assessment. It's not a requirement, nor is it wanted under a master plan. However, we are asked to do an environmental overview. And one of the impact categories under NEPA is noise. And so we put together the noise contours. And what we're showing you here is what we show as the current noise exposure contour map. This contour is representative of the average daily noise based on current operation of the airport. The outer ring, what we're showing is green. That green ring is representative of what is called the 60 DNL or day-night noise level. It is an average day, and the 60 is for visual purposes only. We did this to simply show you where it went, even though it doesn't extend beyond airport. It's on airport. What is important is the orange line or orange contour represents the 65 DNL, which is by all environmental groups, the threshold of significance as defined, which would result in the need to mitigate some level of noise problem. So if you have a noise sensitive receptor within that orange line, the FAA could then expend part of its federal monies for noise mitigation to help that noise sensitive entity, whether it be insulation all the way up to acquisition and relocation. What we're showing you is that orange line stays really close to the airport runway and does not extend beyond property line. We then showed the long-term, it's just not up there. This is the long-term contour. And one of the inputs is number of operations, and then another input is the type of airplanes. In our long-term contour, we went really aggressive and tripled what we forecasted for business jets to make sure we were adequately representing what would be a noise contour. And as you can see, the orange still remains tightly around the runway. The green, which again is only for illustration, barely exceeds on the northeast side of property. In other words, what we're showing you is that there is not a significant noise problem. And the significant, again, is not my opinion word. It is an official word. The FAA would make a determination of no significance. So while I want to be sensitive to those that would suggest that at midnight or at 7 a.m, you may be woke up or disturbed by a noise event in a single event level, that's true. The FAA does not use single event to determine significance. They just don't. They use this modeling here as agreed to with all of the environmental groups. The other environmental issue, again, and we do have wetlands in and about the area. As an impact category, we have to be sensitive to it, at least identified at this point, so that there is understanding that if this these alternative developments were to be approached, you will likely have to be within an environmental assessment or more to determine impacts. So it's likely that these, again, the wetlands will need to be mitigated to some form or fashion following DNR and its processes as you go through design. So we do believe that there will be some level of wetland impact. We also know that you have a wild and scenic river nearby, and we believe that we've remained out of the buffers of that. Again, any environmental assessment that will be done with any of these projects will also go through these again at greater depth and detail. As far as the remainder of what's in that packet, that if you've read it online, we also had to do waste, and generally speaking, the form of waste that we are required to look at is simply that which is physical stuff thrown away. The FAA's goal is to make sure that any airport owned facility provides some level of waste management to include recycling availabilities. And we believe that is done here. And so with that, there's not a lot of information like we had last time, but that's basically where we've paused to come to this body to present, to again, tell you we're in draft. We believe we worked really hard on coming to the solution that may be the best that we can offer at this point, as far as trying to both meet the community's desires as well as your obligation in the county as far as being the sponsor of the airport. We're not looking for an approval at this point. We are simply asking for the county to consider this plan and give us some level of acceptance so that we can proceed with at least a high level of belief that we won't have to redo everything again if it's completely changed later. And so our goal here is to simply present to you and offer you the ability to give us your feedback at this point. So with that, I will throw it back to the body to open up the question and answer.
So now it's open to the public. If you wish to speak, we're going to ask you to state your name and your address and try to keep it to 3 minutes. And we don't want people to repeat the same thing over and over. Does anybody wish to speak? Yes.
I'm Gina Capelli. My address is. Oh, I was gonna say I talk loud.
We have a recording going.
Oh, okay.
All you're gonna do is write down her name. That's it.
Address is 10954 North Maria Lane. And my question is, why are planes going off at 4:35 o'clock in the morning? I don't understand it. And my second question is, what happens to our property value?
The answer to the first question is that there are no limitations on aircraft when they operate. I would suspect if they left at 4:30, it's because they needed to get somewhere from that point in time of beginning. And so with that said, and not to be flippant at all, people do leave at that time of day. And so I think we talked about last time what is known as ANCA, or the Airport Noise and Capacity Act. The airport cannot limit operations to time of day. The airport must remain open 24 hours. It is not allowed, the county could not put forth or prohibit that type of activity. So it's unfortunate, and again, I understand that operation, by the way, as far as we develop the noise contour, is penalized. It gets a higher level of decibels in the model because it's obviously louder at that point in time, and that sounds weird, but noise is a relative measure to the receiver. And when you have no ambient noise, because it's, everybody's sleeping, an operation at 4 a.m. is louder than it is at 7 a.m. That's just the way that you receive it. So the model does account for that. And I think we were up to 4% of all operations were between the hours of 10 and 7. So the penalties are all in the modeling. And so it's understood that that's going to happen, but the specifics of that operation, I couldn't tell you. It's just simply they were going somewhere that they needed to be. As far as property values, I can't specifically talk about your property values. I can give you only the anecdotal information that we've seen with appraisals across the country. Airports generally increase property values. For whatever reason, people move towards airports, not away from airports. So airport properties in and about usually go up in value, not down in value. It's a weird phenomena, and you can look it up. There are many, many studies out there that have proven this out. which is interesting, by the way. You would maybe assume that it would be the opposite. So good question. Yes.
Nancy Schreier, 10777 North Namakagon Lane. Two questions, one comment.
Okay.
One, what is the federal law so we can grasp this better that relates to the FAA having this overwhelming control over the county and the citizens and everything else? If you could give us that. Two, so this plan is based on a concept, a belief that you have that Sawyer County is going to grow this much, yet the 2023 census showed that we have 18,587 people in 23, and in projected growth is 3% to a total of 19,158 people in the year 2043. Why do we need such a huge airport where our business is based on tourism, and the people who come to Hayward and Sawyer County come for the natural resources? And then I think that's enough for now, if I can reserve later.
The rules and regulations are many, and they're all codified in CFRs, Code of Federal Regulation. I could sit here and find a list and repeat them out to you. They are easily findable on Google. You are and have been funded since the 60s as an airport by the FAA. This airport is federally obligated, and that's a word, again, it's not an opinion word, it's the actual word they use. You have 39 grant assurance obligations when you take federal funds that you have to follow. And they are very clear on how you have to maintain your airport in a manner that's capable of meeting and dealing with current aviation demand and the promotion of such in the future. And so that is the rule. That is the golden handcuff of getting 90% of the development of an airport paid for by the federal government. They pay for 90%. You pay for, well, you only pay 5 because the BOA pays for 5. So of every dollar, you're paying a nickel. And the handcuff is the obligations that they require of you because it's their money. And so that's really where the hammer lies, is under that. There are other federal laws like ANCA, which was of 1991, and that is a codified. That was done by Congress to ensure that the airports weren't. There were many communities that simply started to believe that they could come in and put in curfews and the like. And this is, again, that agreement where the FAA said, or the federal government, the DOT said, you can't do that. We'll make sure the airplanes get quieter. You can't stop airport use. So what they did is they required aircraft engines to get quieter, and they have much quieter. It's not even close. And we went from stage 1 to now stage 3 plus. We're almost into stage 4 jet engines. And so that was the trade-off. They then said, with this trade-off, you can't restrict use of the airport. It is open all the time. It's similar to, again, the best example I can give is you cannot do the same thing to an interstate. You can't stop people from using it at 4 in.the.morning. You can't stop trucks from traveling down it. People will use it because it's a federal facility. I think your other question was regarding the growth, and you were relaying it to population. And I think that is a fair relation. We do it ourselves in our forecasting when you relate population to a specific aviation type segment, but there are others. And I'll give you the best example of why we're concerned and the reason we're promoting this. When we started this 2 years ago, year and a half ago, we were showing 244 sea operations. You've doubled that in 2 years. Your sea operations are almost at 500 right now. We just did the last 12 months, and you're at 440 category C aircraft. And if you add the 92 Ds in, you're over 500. So right now, you're already exceeding the 500 operations, and you can legally be required to start moving down the road of meeting that C&D operations. And that, again, is not opinion. These are actual operations that the FAA's system catches. And so that's why the FAA requires this of you. For whatever reason, Jack's Links wants to operate here. For whatever reason, Kid Rock wants to come in and visit the community in a BizJet or whatever, or whomever it is. And there's nothing you can do to stop that. They're obviously using it. And so the FAA expects the county to in turn put investment back in to ensure the safety of those operations. So it could be tied to population, but it doesn't always have to be tied to population, if that makes sense.
Yes. Carl?
Thank you. Carl Kemper with Becker Hoppy Associates, helping with the master plan project here. I did just pull that up while Mike was talking for the exact federal regulation. And you'll be able to find it most easily kind of in layman's terms if you Google FAA grant assurances or FAA federal grant assurances. The FAA has a nice user guide that puts them into pretty easily understandable terms. But what that user guide is referencing is actually Title 49 USC Subtitle 7 as amended is if you were to dig into federal code, that's where it would more in legalese describe those grant assurances.
And to give you an example, I'll read one that I think is important in this context. Grant Assurance 21, again, they're 39. It's titled Compatible Land Use. The airport and its sponsor shall take appropriate action to the extent reasonable, including the adoption of zoning laws to restrict the use of land adjacent to or in the immediate vicinity of the airport to activities and purposes compatible with normal airport operations, including landing and takeoff. Basically, what this is saying is that it is the community's responsibility to ensure that you have compatible land use around the airport. So technically, the county should be trying to enforce non-residential type land use as much as reasonable in and around the airport itself. So that is one of the obligations. There are many, many others. And again, that is where the hammer lies on what the FAA does when they have it. There was question locally, I know, about the extents to which the assurances exist. And it depends on the improvement. Some improvements, it'll be 10 years, some it's 20, some it's 40. But for land, it's in perpetuity. So since the federal government bought the land, it's forever. So unless in some rare circumstance, you can be released from that obligation by the sale back of this property, you are forever obligated for that airport.
Yes.
Lindsay Schreier, 10777 North Namacoggin Lane. Mike, could you please let us know how many properties will have to be acquired?
Yes.
North and west, as well as south and east with this new runway?
Let's see if this works.
Your second plan.
Yeah.
Stay there, Nancy. Stay there until he answers you.
Yeah.
Up there.
It's a great question because if those that remember our last meeting, we actually had alternatives that were going to require several acquisitions of property. In our plan now, the only properties that would be acquired on the west side, let's talk west and south. The west would include, I'm sorry, I'm tethered, so I'm kind of behind here. The west would include, again, the immediacy of this area. The immediate development area may require some property acquisition. And here along Hospital and Airport.
Mike, the question I think was pertaining to the runway shift.
Yeah, no, I know. And so when I show you that, the only properties that could potentially come into play, and I'm saying potentially on purpose, would be in the very, could you point to it, Carl, up there?
Yes.
No, go to the south. So there's two homes, go north of that, yep, right there. There are two homes that are located in the what I'll call is the 3/4 of a mile visibility RPZ. This RPZ is required only if you have an approach with not lower than 3/4 mile visibility. The reason I'm trying to be, and I'm not trying to be obtuse, to get this, generally you can't have homes in it to begin with, right? So the FAA generally won't approve that approach level because they know there's homes in there. So what they would say is, well, to get that, you would first have to acquire those two homes. So this is truly a chicken and the egg thing. What we would suggest is only if those two homeowners were willing sellers and there's a desire for an approach of not lower than 3/4, would that be something that they should approach? We're not suggesting in any way, shape, or form something to the level of eminent domain. We're simply saying that there are two homes in that RPZ, and if they are willing and they're available and the county can acquire them, fair market value, you should do it, move forward. If not, you can stay with the 1 mile RPZ, which does not have the homes in it. And so you would just have a larger, it's actually all the way, yeah, right there. So you would just simply have, you would lose 1/4 of a mile visibility improvement, which is not going to be a game changer. And it would be preferred to have it, but not required. So while it's on there, we're just simply saying that would be a voluntary process. The same holds on the north end, on the east corner. There's a property where if you go down to 1/2 mile minimums on that approach, that home or homestead would be in that area, which also would be only available if it was a willing operation. So you could, again, maintain the same level of minimums on the north end without any acquisition. The only acquisition we're saying you will likely need is in the red areas or the purpley red areas there and then right there. And the only reason you need those in fee or physically is because of the potential of what you may need to do, like clear trees or put in a navigational aid or whatnot. And there are no homes in those areas. Those are simply just land acquisitions. So our proposal does not include buying people's homes, not one, unless there's willing sellers.
So maybe I'm not understanding this correctly, but as you're moving down
East.
west and south,
We're actually moving east and north.
but aren't you going to be building all of these 67, 60 by 60 and 80 by 80 hangars on the northwest side? And that's like feet from the river.
No, it's inside of Airport Road.
Okay, so then what about the people who live down there? If
On
we
the-
close that road,
No, we're not closing that portion. We're not proposing that closure.
well,
We're only proposing on the southwest corner between Nemocoggan and Hospital. That's it. And if that becomes an issue locally, we can run the road on the western edge of that development. We would rather not as a through road because that then puts noise pollution closer to the homes, which we heard in our last meeting was a negative aspect of those alternatives. We are trying to keep that road from being run along the outer boundary of those acreages because they would have to be. Because again, the one thing I will tell you that land is the FAA's, and if this runway's not moved, that is the only area that the airport can develop at all. And so if that runway is not moved, that area would have to close that road. There would be no choice.
so, okay.
No, you can continue. I was just saying he's
So
going
if we don't move the runway and you move closer to the river, won't we meet some environmental issues there?
Well, there's already things like homes near the river already. So the belief is, yes, you can move closer to the river and use environmental safe practices. It exists all the time.
The airport and these
Yes.
jets?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. The containment of fuel, all of those things now are highly regulated. You have to have a SWIP, you have to have stormwater prevention and pollution plans. The FAA is very, very much interested in ensuring that that's not going to hit the river. So yes, I would confidently say that that can be engineered in the plan.
Ron Ulmer, 10713 Namakagon Lane. Mike, you said that, well, I want to just talk about the land side development and not that. That those properties that the FAA owns, that if I want to go in and build a hangar, you can't say no.
Correct, without good reason, yes.
Aha, a good reason. I'm assuming all of that land side development requires to muster up to environmental assessment.
Yes.
Including,
To a different, I would, and I'm trying to hedge only because most hangars, environmental assessments are CADX. You don't have a full assessment. You have a categorical exclusion document. So
there's a number of assessments and things like
they're
that.
just much more limited.
But who makes the determination as to whether or not that development or that portion of the project truly passes environmental assessment?
The FAA.
The FAA themselves, so that when the assessment was done in 2002 to close Airport Road, did the FAA pull back on that?
I didn't read that report. I don't know.
All right, because there was an assessment done. I don't know if the county knows that or not. With public hearings in 2002, a very, very similar concept of closing Airport Road from Namakagon Lane to Hospital Road. And after all the public hearings on the assessment, the project got dropped. Okay, so that obviously didn't measure up on that assessment issue. Secondly, the portion which I believe is MSR along which you would purchase has an awful, that's a massive change in impervious surface, which we know. So I'm assuming that first phase in addition to Airport Road would also have to pass some assessment, particularly as close to the river as that is. Okay, right?
Yeah, they would likely have to do some sort of retention.
Kind of probably like to do that assessment before you purchase it.
That's quite within the rights and possibilities of the community. It's not a requirement. Absolutely.
I understand.
Yeah.
I've got your requirement.
But no, the reality is that, and I'll say this, my friends that are engineers are really good at designing things to meet design. So I am certain that there would be some level of detention, retention.
I've worked in development and land use planning and seen all kinds of assessment processes that don't make it.
Yeah.
As strong as the engineers are.
Yep.
All right. So because every one of those assessments brings up another public hearing. So my question is, whoever's holding that public hearing, and I want that property, I want that 9 acres, I want to put hangars on it. It's going to kick in an environmental assessment.
It'll kick in some level of environmental.
That's going to be a totally different noise situation from your orange circles, because this is sliding open doors and on hangars and things like that at 4:30 in the morning or something like that, and all kinds of other kinds of issues. And what we're being told is properly, I'm not fighting you.
Yeah. No.
What we're being told is that each one of these projects requires an additional approval. So once the county accepts or endorses the master plan concept, each element will require additional approval, correct?
No. Because, and here's why I say that. If you have a plan and it's a one hangar development, as an example, that can be CADX that does not require a public meeting.
It's going to have to pass assessment.
No. CADX is an environmental assessment. It's a limited environmental assessment. The FAA makes determinations on the level of environmental requirement. An assessment is a high level. An EIS is the highest. A CADX is simply a tabletop exercise of environmental. You run through the impact categories and you prove that there's no significant impact. The FAA will then sign off on it. There is no requirement to go to the public.
The county board has nothing to do with it.
The county board would have the project. So you have a hangar developer that comes to you and says, we want to build a a hangar, and they'll require you to do some level of environmental, if it's a Cat X.
Right. Some level of environmental
Yes.
assessment is done with the county being involved.
Again, if this is simply a one hangar deal, I'm not trying to be obtuse again. You won't always have public input. What will require public input is the bigger development options,
Yeah.
the runways, the taxiways, the aprons. That one development area back there along the river will likely require an EA. But if you had one hangar built in that northeast side or northwest side, you'd probably do a tabletop. It would never go in front of the public, and it would just be developed. As long as the FAA considers it, it's their property.
I brought this up, Mr. Kingsley was here during the meeting. You are a wonderful advocate for the FAA and the aviation community. In this process, we're being told that the county board, the commission here, the Public Works Commission, kind of has their hands tied.
They do.
You really don't have much power, but the public process of what most of the people around here think is the proper kind of public process makes them our advocates.
Mhm.
And so we're going to have to continue in this path of finding out where's our defenses, where are the community defenses against, not against, in deference to some of this FAA control that is tying everyone's hands. So stay with us because we're going to be pushing on that.
Yep. And again, I appreciate your position. I would say though, it's no different than personal ownership. The city can't come in and push you around on your own property either. It's your property. And so they can give you some, but they can't come in and they can't change your land
This
use.
is public domain, whether it's the FAA or whether it's the county, this is public domain. This is not personal property.
What I'm saying is the similar controls exist. The county and the city cannot come in and change your land use zoning. That's called a taking legally. So you have the same types of responses. And I want to be very clear here. I am an advocate for the airport and the county behind it and the FAA. But we also went above and beyond to try to do what we could to protect what we heard from you as being important. I would be remiss to say that we can provide a perfect alternative. We just can't. There are going to be things that are going to have to be swallowed both ways on this because it's just what it is. Airport road closure, again, we could keep it open, but it's going to have to run closer to the river because it's going to have to run around the development. As far as the EA goes on the first time, I don't know why it was killed. It could have been the community simply just decided not to do it and chose another piece of property, which was available then. It's not available now. You are left with this property owner. No, I'm saying they didn't develop it then because they didn't need it. They need it now. That's the difference.
Big for hangars in 2002. It's all part of the same process.
Well, but my point is they built hangars. They had the land then. They don't have it now. Jack's Links wasn't there. That's my point, is that you now have very little to no development opportunities, which is why the handcuffs exist, as you brought up. Not to be argumentative, it's simply what it is. The airport is a federal installation. It is owned by the FAA and there are obligations. I sound like a broken record and I apologize. It's just, you can, and we talked about this earlier and I'll say it now. You have the option of approaching the FAA and attempting to close this airport. There are case studies out there, and I gave them today, Santa Monica and East Hampton. And if you want to go that route, you have that available to you and take it to your sponsorship and ask for them to advocate for you. I'm going to tell you that's where it gets really challenging because nobody's done it. The only one that did in an immediacy was MIGS. And that was because the dailies took a bulldozer out on the runway and they bulldozed the runway closed. And then they spent tens of millions of dollars immediately to pay the FAA back because they could. You don't have that scenario available to you now. And that's why it's such a challenge, in which I'm trying to help you understand, not because I'm favoring this development. I'm simply giving you what's going to happen as far as the hurdles that will happen if you go that route. Carl.
I was just going to add a couple pieces of information with regard to the previous question, some of the explanation that Mike just gave regarding some of the environmental process. We've been through that many times and helped with that. With regard to public hearings and public input, there may not be a public hearing for every federal environmental document that gets done, whether it's a CADX or an environmental assessment or an EIS. there is some form of public involvement with every one of those federal actions and every one of those federal environmental documents. So it may not be in the form of a public hearing, but there is a public involvement process, a public involvement opportunity, a public comment opportunity for every single one of those federal actions. Mike makes a good point, however, about, those environmental documents are required when federal money is being used towards the improvement. So if you have a private stakeholder who comes in and says, I want to put this hangar here, I don't need the federal government's help to build this taxiway to my hangar. I'll do it myself. I'll build the taxiway myself. We don't need any of the federal dollars. There is then, based on my understanding, not a federal environmental document required. They certainly still need to comply with all DNR regulations, all, county regulations, everything that would be required if, let's say, you wanted to build a garage next to your house. It's a private action. You don't have to do a federal environmental document for it, but you do still need to comply with local zoning and everything else like that. So I just want to be clear and make sure that nobody is, misunderstanding that yes, a federal environmental document could be required for improvements, or it might not be required for improvements depending on where the funding is coming from.
Mr. Alvarado.
I think he answered my question. If somebody's gonna build a hangar, we're gonna develop a parcel. Improve your surface, reach stormwater retention, setbacks, all DNR, wetland filling.
Exactly. We do engineering work all the time for private developers who are not receiving federal funding. We still need to meet DNR construction standards, both for during construction and post-construction standards. So that would be your stormwater treatment. That would be not only your treatment of your stormwater, but also your release of your stormwater, making sure that you're not releasing stormwater too quickly out into the environment. So doing that detention or retention, it all still applies. It just may be different whether or not you need to do that federal environmental document. And I think a couple more pieces that I'll add to it. There was a question about acquiring the property and does the property where the hangars are shown, does it need to be acquired for hangars? There are actually I could probably identify a few different other reasons that the FAA would participate in and would promote acquiring that property, even if it would lay vacant for the future. Mike had mentioned the grant assurance about protection of airspace, about zoning, about all of those things. And again, the acquisition of that property would likely occur and be found to be eligible and justified, even if no hangars were proposed on that property at all.
In all of this said, I also, one of the things I did want to hit on earlier when I was talking about the transition to a C&D airplane, this kind of goes back to the tie. The responsibility of the safety of the airport is truly local. The FAA expects, again, that they give you the 90% that you're going to do with their facility, what they require of you to do with their facility. And so we've had local concern about whether or not we should just simply have this no action alternative and just let the airport be and go as it is. And the answer to that is, if you do that, which is an option, it's absolutely an option. But if you follow that path, this 500 operations I've told you in the last 12 months, if it continues, and then you have an accident by one of those airplanes in an area that should have been protected, all of that liability falls back on the sponsor. So that one event could create millions of dollars of liability to the community. That's real. And never want to talk accident in aviation, right? But the reality is it is a real concern. And we wouldn't be doing our job if we didn't tell you that that is one of the outcomes of doing nothing at your airport. And so it's important that you, as a sponsor, do these planning exercises to get to that position, to know what you need to do, and that you are in line with the standards so that if there is litigation, you have protection from that litigation. Yes, sir.
Mr. Kurzel.
Benjamin Kurtzwell, 16040 W West Lane. First of all, again, I appreciate all the work that's been put into all these plans, and I appreciate being invited to the earlier meeting at 4 o'clock. I appreciate all the information. I just want to be clear, again, from my point of view, there are two main issues here. One is residents' houses and having hangars close to those houses, or taking residents' houses. The other is, again, in this proposed plan with having these hangars right on top of the river. I guess that's the main concern, I think, of most of the residents, is either getting their homes taken, their impact of their homes, or potentially any kind of situation environmental with the river. I do know that there are other federal agencies that are interested in getting involved in this. One of them is the National Park Service. And I guess at that, I'm wondering at what point too, would they, maybe if this plan was looked at, if they could help with part of the environmental assessment plan, because I think most of the residents would appreciate being kept in the loop, maybe not, again, if there's public input, but being kept in the loop above and beyond what's required. And also doing what we can to make sure that any environmental assessment again, at least something of that level as opposed to the bare minimum, I think would be great, especially when talking about the Namakagon River. Again, I appreciate all of the hard work that's been done and I truly hope and expect it's already been done, but I truly hope the county has run a lot of this stuff past legal, because Mike knows his stuff, but like I said, I asked him if he's an engineer or a lawyer, and he said he's a planner. So there are a lot of things being thrown around here legal-wise that, like, again, we want to check out, and I hope the county's doing their due diligence with legal, making sure everything's checked out too. But thank you very much. And again, the main thing is, let's try to get the National Park Service involved. What would it take to get them involved? I guess, because I think they're kind of chopping in the bit, because this is a national scenic riverway and everything like that too. So the Namakagon is something that people really are concerned about. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for that question. It's a great question. Mike had alluded to wetlands a little bit earlier and working with DNR, and that was just one example of a resource agency that would be, that will need to be coordinated with during an environmental study, an environmental document, when the time comes to do that, when the need is there for the project, when this rough plan is in place, then you move into those environmental studies and you work with not only the DNR, I mean, we work with not only the DNR, but the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, the National Park Service. There are many agencies that are referred to as the resource agencies that we are required to work with, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, throughout those environmental documentation processes. And so what we do in collaboration with Mike on this plan is we try to make a best guess as to what we think could work in terms of working with all of those stakeholders. Mike kind of used the word compromise earlier. We're trying to strike a compromise between meeting the needs of the public and the FAA and their safety standards, while also meeting the needs of the resource agencies and the resources that they are working to protect. So when we put this plan together, for example, you look at the proposed hangars up here on this parcel that would be acquired. You look at the proposed hangars there. We did look into setbacks of those. We looked into buffers. You can see that there is a buffer left there on the exhibit, and we're doing our best to just try to make a best guess. And so then this plan moves forward once the need is there, once the property is acquired, once there is actually a project ready to move forward that is generally based on this plan, then you jump into either the categorical exclusion study that Mike mentioned or the environmental assessment. And that is when you work with those resource agencies, you make refinements as needed to try to strike that compromise, strike that balance, do kind of a cost benefit almost, and try to strike that balance to make it so that it is as acceptable as it's going to be from anybody. We don't like I don't like taking wetlands. I'm an outdoorsman. I mean, I lived here for a summer and I would go and fish in the Namakagon River, and I don't want to see it degraded. So
Nobody wants to. I mean,
right,
again,
we do our best.
Yeah, the other issue, again, I guess that I remember too, while you're talking, was zoning. This is a confusion I mean, we look at the parcel, this is owned by Surrey County. But yet Kaufman Associates keeps saying that the FAA owns this property. And that zoning, this rezone that happened in 19, and that there's nothing to be done with the zoning on the property. Yet we're talking about hangars that have to meet county zoning. That seems kind of contradictory. You're saying we use county zoning on the buildings on the land, but not on the actual land?
You can't use county zone, federal
Uh,
supersedes county. So you couldn't do something that meets county zoning but does not meet FAA regulations. You can do something that meets both.
Okay,
Talking about setbacks and.
right. But again, I'm just saying, so who owns the property though? I believe the county owns it and there may be encumbrances by the FAA. I don't know if it says it on the deed when I'm looking at, on the Nova system or not.
The FAA paid for 90% of the property. They own it.
Okay, but that's not who actually, again, I guess I'm a property.
They can't deed it locally. We talked about this earlier. The deed goes in.
And that's where there's some confusion because again, for people who look on the Nova system to see who owns the property or the GIS system, it says Sawyer County. So again, that's what people assume. So again, there's that question about using, we can't just do something with the land zoning, but we're doing it with the zoning, on the buildings. Now, if the FAA owns this land, as you so insist, then why is the sponsor liable if there's a plane crash?
Because the sponsor is required to make improvements. They're the local entity. They are the owner of the airport per se. They aren't the owner of the property. So again, I can't describe it anymore. If what you were saying was true, we would have not had a Santa Monica problem. We wouldn't have had an East Hampton. We wouldn't
I'm
have.
not familiar with those, I'm sorry.
And so again, I say that this is not an opinion. There's plenty of case out there and I agree with you. I'm not a lawyer. And I welcome the county to do the research and take the things that I've said and examine. I've just been doing this for 30 years and I've seen a lot. And I know what the FAA will do. I've seen what they do. All I'm trying to give here is answers to what the pitfalls you could follow through. I in no way benefit from this improvement. I will do nothing with it after. I will not make a cent from any of that development. My goal is to try to help the county do the best with their valuable resource. And by the way, I'm sure there are many in this room that would also argue to the economic impact that this makes positive to the community. And so this is a positive facility. This absolutely does improve your community. And so the point is, we're trying to do the best of both here. We really did spend the better part of 5 months iterating these alternatives to try to come up with something that would meet the needs of everybody. And it won't. Nothing ever does. And so I apologize again, as earlier, I'm not trying to shut down the discourse. I'm just trying to tell you what you're going to run into as a buzzsaw if you try to take that argument forward.
And that's what I think a lot of people would like is that worst case scenario, because if we were told, and again, I know we talked about this earlier, that it's hard to quantify exactly, but if there's even a ballpark range and we were told, oh my God, it's going to cost this much, that would probably, change a lot of people's minds about whether to go forward or to even think about a no action plan. Because again, from what you were saying, a no action plan would technically be ceasing the airport, which I don't think anyone wants. But again, it was the idea of a no action plan. But thank you all for the time. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Mr. Wayne Williamson.
Wayne Williamson.
Gotta come up to the speaker, please. There you go.
Wayne Williamson, 10842 North Riverside Road. I want to make it just a quick statement. The airport needs to get further and further away from the river, not closer. That's all I want to say.
Thank you. Mr. Devin Weaver.
Delvin Weaver, W160 Metcalf Road, Stone Lake. My wife and I are the owners of the property at 15115 Hospital Road, the intersection of Hospital Road and Airport Road, where is currently being leased to Machine and Repair Solutions. So that's the red property that you see close to the river, where they have potentially putting hangars. The county does not own that. Lily and I do. That land is currently zoned Industrial 1. It was formerly Hayward Wood Products. That's why it's zoned that way. So it's the same as LP, Arkland, et cetera, which is also what airports need zoned. As far as environmental, before I ever owned the property, while Hayward Wood Products was there was storm sewers, retention systems put in to curb debris from the sawmill, which is far dirtier than what we're doing, going into the river. and certainly far dirtier than what any airport ever would be. Currently, the property is being used for heavy equipment repair and machining. I don't mean to be ornery or cynical to anybody here, but airplanes are cleaner than we are. I'm just being honest. We do work on aviation equipment. We work closely with the airport. We work with Lynx some. We work with Stillwater Aviation. We've done work for multiple there. And obviously, with them acquiring that land requires us moving, which I guess money buys a lot of things if there's money involved. And I guess what I told some that have talked to me about the possibility, I've heard rumors in this for a couple years already. I told them I'm willing to talk, they just need to keep their checkbook in front of their mouth. And so I'm telling you that publicly. And I will say this one more thing, as all the neighbors around here know. In May of 2015, when we purchased that land, there was a lot of buildings, a lot of liability, and an absolute jungle. And through blood, sweat, and tears, my family has made a park out of that land. And we literally have our own private park on the river. I have canoed that river literally every calendar month in the last year, right through the winter. I have canoed it well over 20 times. I enjoy that river as much as anybody here does. I have a lot of attachment to that piece of property, just as much as anybody does. But there's realistic needs in the community also. The way things stand, and I understand things take time, but the way things stand, I have a piece of property and a business leasing it. But we're in a position where we are handcuffed to be able to make any improvements. Because it is literally a waste of my time and money to do any improvements further on that land. And so what I have to say from here is whatsoever thou doest, do thou quickly.
Thank you. Ms. Andrea Whitmer?
Hello. Andrea Whitwer, 10370N Sawmill Road. And that's just on the other side of Highway 77, underneath the flyway. My husband and I watch those flights go over our house and listen to the jiggling china on the shelves. We've not complained. I don't like it. I just didn't think that we would be looking at such a improvement on the airport. My family has been involved in watching the airport from it originally being established, and my brother-in-law using it quite a lot because he was down by the VOR and had the dubious honor of being the first home taken for the expansion of the airport. Subsequently, my two nieces had nervous breakdowns, but that is not your issue. I'm not here to speak to the emotional part of airports. I am a little resentful that in a Republican state that we could stand with our arm behind our back and be told what we can and we cannot do. Because I think there are alternatives, and I think we do have some alternatives. I don't like being ever told that we do not have the freedom to run our community as we choose. As a member of the town board of supervisors in the town of Hayward, we have felt rather left out of this decision-making process, which is perfectly logical. It's none of our business. It only belongs to the county and to the FAA and federal government. I just never thought that it would impact me personally as much as it is. And at the meeting we had the other night, my question was about economic growth in our community due to the airport. I tend to think that that might be a little skewed toward people not like me who live underneath the airport sound barrier thing. I think that the people who own the large planes that need much more space to use our airport have a lot more power than I do. And I guess in our state and our county, I'll just have to get used to that. I have options. I can sell my little house on Lake Hayward and I can move out. There's nowhere to go, so I'll probably have to move out of the maybe southern part of the county. I can go down by Coudray, where there's still land. I won't like that much. But I never, ever thought that in our county, in northern Wisconsin, that we would be told that we have no options. And I do hope that this committee will take the opportunity, every opportunity, to check into what the economical part of this, how's the impact for the town of Hayward, who has 3 roads that will be impacted. We maintain those roads, we build those roads, and we have the people paying taxes on those roads. And I don't think, I could be wrong, that the town of Hayward will gain much from having those homes helpfully removed. So I hope that those are things that the committee, that the future plan of this airport will kind of keep in mind, that there are other governmental governmental entities involved, and there's very real human lives that are being impacted who live here, who vote, who pay taxes here. Maybe we can't afford a jet. Maybe we can't even afford a little airplane. Maybe we can't even afford the lessons to fly an airplane. I've flown out of that airport in a private airplane. It was a lot of fun. It really was. But I can't say that I think that the economic impact of that is big enough to impact so many lives. As you can see here, there's just a small tip of the iceberg of people who are even aware of what's going to happen. The disruption in our traffic patterns, the disruption in the river traffic. I've been down that river probably 1,000 times. And the Grandma's Wild River Floaters floated it every weekend all summer long for many, many years. And I hope for sure that the environmental impacts will be limited, very, very limited. And also to Hatchery, a little creek that comes down to the end where you're going to be taking some of that land. How that will be impacted. There's just so much going on here. And I don't want to sound cranky. I feel cranky. But like I said, I can either die or I can move on and it won't bother anybody at all. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Is there anybody else that would like to speak to the committee?
I'd like to speak from online, please.
We'll get to you.
Thank you.
I'm Jean Frisky and I live at 10527 Airport Road, just south of the airport, and I'm on the flight path to the airport. I've been there for 64 years. I have a beautiful property. Yes, the assessed valuation has decreased. And I've witnessed in those 64 years all kinds of planes. My question is there a regulation how high the planes have to be when they hit the end of the runway?
Well, when they hit the end of the runway, they're on the ground, and I don't need to be, hopefully anyway, on their wheels. No, the general practice is to train that you come aboard the end of the runway at 50 feet above, give or take. And so that's the general try. But again, most pilots try to hit the numbers, they get down and so there are things on the runway called visual path indicators that help pilots align to the proper alignment down to the runway. Today we have a thing called ADS-B, which by all aircraft that are operating with that, you can watch everything that they're doing. Historically, we've heard people complain that people fly too low over there. And whether that's true or not, it's not ours to make that determination. But if you ever have a complaint, you can always ask. There's FlightAware is a free program. You can watch airplanes move. You can see how high they are above the ground as they come in and all those things. So we have a better way of testing that. But most pilots, I want to be very clear. I'm a pilot. Carl's a pilot. Derek's a pilot. We take our job seriously because our ticket depends on it. If we're willy-nilly about how we're flying, we're either going to put ourselves into danger or we're going to lose our license. And so most pilots aren't Maverick. I mean, most aren't doing the upside down things. They truly do take this thing called flying seriously because it's a privilege and it can be dangerous if you're not doing it well. So I kind of get where you're going. I would say that you may have had people up and down on that path, but generally they try to come in about 50 above the threshold.
Okay, well, we had one come in a couple weeks ago. I think I did call the airport. I didn't leave a message though. And I thought he was going to take the light off my garage. He was really low.
Well, yeah, and then sometimes too with weather, they may try to come in lower from a further distance because they're coming in. Yeah, sure. Carl?
I don't know that we need to expand on that. From what I remember during my flying lessons 8 years ago, if you're over an unpopulated area, you need to be at least 500 feet above the ground. If you're over a populated area, you need to be at least 1,000 feet above the ground. But those apply to non-takeoff and landing situations. If you're taking off or landing, you can fly at whatever altitude you need to in order to complete that takeoff and landing.
Frank Zufall, Stark County Record. So it's the safety issue, it seems primarily is the runway, moving the runway to the north and the west. Now, the hangar issue, as far as that development, how pressing is that? Because that is not necessarily a safety issue.
Correct. That's more of a demand-driven issue.
So as far as like the FAA is concerned, as far as development, that I would think is a lesser priority, the hangars versus the runway. Is that correct?
Well, yes. I mean, if these numbers pan out and they continue, the FAA likely won't do the runway off 1 year's numbers. If you duplicate it next year, you're likely going to be talking to them about it, right? As far as the land side goes, the critical mass is you currently have people that want to build hangars right now. We had people on our committee. We have people that are on a waiting list. We have a number of people that want to be here and build hangars. So if they petition the FAA and suggest that you're not helping them do that, they can go into a Part 16 or they can sue you to force your hand. And that's why what we're trying to do is provide a solution that doesn't require the county to first go to the 9 acres. That's all that's left.
Can I ask you, where is that 9 acres?
The 9 acres is the closest to Nemocoggan, right there. Yep, right there. And so our goal in this entire planning process, based on what we heard from the community, is that land right there was very proximate to the homes. We were trying to stay out of it in the immediacy. So that's why we went to the Hospital Road alignment in the short term to give them time to build enough hangars or to allow for them to build hangars so that the runway can be shifted. And once the runway shifted, you now have the entirety of the runway length to go up and down, and you could build those hangars there, and then you may never, ever have to go into the 9 acres. That was really, truly what we're trying to accomplish. And so in doing so, we think we got the plan to that point. The question is still, can that be done? Did you want to? And so, of course, this still carries with it the need to check environmental clearance and all those things. But you are correct that the design standard, safety standard is not the same, but you still have a grant assurance that says if I have an airplane and I want to base it here, and I approach Andy and I say, hey, I have a plane, I need to build on it. I've got X amount of dollars. I'm a real developer. And he then says, well, all we have is this. And there's no other reason that you could, reasonably deny that developer. They could then go to the FAA and push you to do it. Because they would say that you're discriminating against them on their federal property. And so that's what we're trying to not accomplish. Again, we are truly trying to do something to keep them from having to go into the 9 acres and keep everything inside of Airport Road as possible. And it's going to require the runway to be moved. And I appreciate that comment earlier. I want to be very clear. If that runway does not move, the only property of substantial use right now is the 9 acres. And so that's what we're trying to stay away from.
Just to expand on that, and I think many of the Public Works Committee members, I think Chair Kinsley was here at the last public involvement meeting that we had, or a public information meeting, whatever this is termed as. I don't think the other committee members were here, but at the last public information meeting, we heard you. We heard the public come out and say, we don't want to see hangar development there. That's where we were showing hangar development, and that's where we anticipated that the hangar development would occur first, because that is the property that the airport owns right now and is accessible today to start putting hangars on. We heard you. We heard your concerns, and that we don't hold these public meetings just as part of part of what we're required to do. We want your input so that we can try to make this plan something that the community can, again, try to strike that compromise. So what we've done with this revised alternative is we have identified that the other property that Mr. Weaver came up and spoke about could be used immediately also for hangar development without developing hangars on the property that does seem to be more sensitive for the neighborhood on Namakagon Lane. So that is why we have revised the plan based on the feedback that we received to try to strike that compromise of still providing hangar space while trying to push off development of hangars along Namakagon Lane as long as we possibly can. And this plan, I think we had another meeting earlier today. I may be getting them mixed up. Maybe Mike already described this. If Mr. Weaver's property is acquired and is used for hangar development, that allows time for the runway shift to occur. After the runway shift occurs, then hangar development could occur there and could again push off the need to develop hangars along Namakagon Road. Now, another thing that we heard at the last public information meeting that we really took to heart, and we have revised this concept to try to accommodate, was the relocation of Airport Road. We were previously showing Airport Road relocated up along the river, the entire way through there on the 9 acres. And we heard from the Namakagon Lane neighborhood that they did not want that because it would push more traffic closer to their houses. And, they didn't want that. They didn't want more traffic coming through their neighborhood. So we said, okay, instead of doing that, we will close Airport Road. We will actually put less traffic past their neighborhood. And so these changes were based on the feedback. And I think that the relocation of Airport Road versus the closure of Airport Road is really one very important factor that we will need the committee to provide us with feedback on, the Public Works Committee and ultimately the county board. And actually, as I listen again to the concerns tonight about, and I did listen to the town board meeting last night as well, some of the concerns about the closure of Airport Road, I think maybe what we should do on the master plan and on the airport layout plan, I think we should show both. I think we should show an ultimate closure of Airport Road that could maybe happen someday. I think we should also show a future relocation of Airport Road that maybe will happen someday. We don't necessarily need to make that decision now. If we show both alternatives on the airport layout plan, it gives the county at any point in time the option to do either one of those alternatives.
And
Mike,
either one of those alternatives would definitely require an environmental assessment. Here's why. The road along the river would require the insurance of keeping the river safe. The closure would likely require a traffic study to ensure that they're not harming people as far as cutting off traffic. That would likely require a full environmental assessment. So yes, those two improvements would go before not just the county, but would require some level of public involvement.
but like Mike says, the need is there and one or the other is going to need to happen likely someday unless people stop flying airplanes all of a sudden.
I think that's a good segue into what I'd just like to mention to answer a question that was made. I've been biting my tongue the best that I can. I'm Derek Leslie. I'm the contracted airport manager, airport operator. Frank brought up a very good question, and I just wanted to make a statement. We do have a hangar sale on the agenda for later this evening in this meeting. As the airport manager, it was brought to my attention that the individual who was selling the hangar had desire to, had to get put onto the county board for consideration. Once the sale is finalized, he's going to be providing me with a list. I already have most of the people, but to my knowledge, there was more than 15 people that expressed desire in purchasing the hangar from this individual. And, in my capacity as the airport manager, I get to do lots of different things, including working with these gentlemen. When there's an airplane that flies low over your house, usually I'm the person that you get to call. So hopefully I'm nice. But one of the issues that I have and one of the issues that you really don't see here tonight, because I've tried to stave off as much as possible, is, those 15 people or more who are really adamant that they want to come to this community. The time for them, and what I'll tell the public now, the time for them to really come to these meetings is when Sawyer County seriously starts discussing doing a development. Right now, we're just looking at a plan. It's important to have done, in my opinion, but at the same time, there's a reason why there's not a lot of people here that are campaigning for this, because in my opinion, now is not the time. I think the time now is for the public to gain the understanding and to understand that this is something that could happen in the future. And at a later time, you will hear from the folks that are prevalent in our, business owners and recreational enthusiasts who want to be here. There will be a time when they come here to address the Public Works Committee, and you will hear from those people a lot. So if anybody just has the idea that,
That's enough. Go ahead, Derek.
So those folks, you will hear from them, if something happens in the future. So at this point in time, I think that there's a large body of people at the airport that are, trying to not rustle feathers in the community, because that's not what this is about right now, in my opinion.
Yeah, and if I could also tag on to that, we have our planning committee. I know it's been brought up, it was at the town meeting last night, the economic output of the airport. What is the economic value? Unfortunately, we should have that number. The problem is the state's delaying its output. The BOA has actually done that study, and the governor's office is holding it for revision. So we don't know what it is, but the number's there. I can tell you, based on the hundreds of economic studies I've seen, the likely value of this airport is 5 million upwards of X. And I'm not going to go there because it could be many things. I could give you a direct correlation anecdotally to a member on our committee. I'm not going to mention who he is, but he's a very big player in the community. He lives here, 5th generation. He owns many airplanes. He employs 70 plus people. He's very much tied to this community because of the airport and would move otherwise. You have that here. And I know that that's anecdotal. And I don't use that to say that those who are impacted negatively should simply not feel that way. Your feelings are valid. In no way, shape, or form do we intend here to suggest that you shouldn't feel negative impact. That is not true. And we're really, truly not trying to minimize it. We really aren't. We simply are doing the job that is required of the county by the FAA to do their job with this airport. And so sometimes we have to promote certain things that aren't going to be the perfect match for everybody, but the goal is to try to get to that best silver bullet if we can. So we're hopeful that we did. I think Carl made a very good plea to the fact that we really worked hard to get to that. Not trying to get you onto our side. We're simply trying to tell you we did hear what you had to say in our first meeting. We got to a point where we had to do something to meet immediate and long-term needs. Hopefully we can get that runway moved. That runway is going to be further north and further east away from most people. The planes going north to south are going to be taking off at a higher level, so they're going to be higher above homes to the south. Everything about that development helps most people. And so again, we're trying, and that's why we push the extension to the north instead of to the south, to get the airplanes taking off further up to the north and away. So there were a lot of factors in this. We were truly, really trying to help in the promotion of the airport, plus the promotion of a better communal relationship with the airport.
Does anybody else wish to speak? Step forward, please.
We have online.
Linda, can we take this online? They asked me.
Lisa?
Yes, my name is Lisa Williamson. I live in Ashland, Wisconsin, and I own the piece of property next to Mr. Weaver's. I do want to acknowledge, Mike, especially that I do think that you really listened to us at that March meeting and then the comments that we sent afterwards. So I want to make that clear. I do appreciate that. The piece of property that I own next to Mr. Weaver's, if you look across the river,
right
all that nice forested land across the river and the piece of property I own, and what was formerly the sawmill, has been in my family for 5 generations. I do apologize for the environmental impacts back then, but we are much better environmentalists now than we were then. We bought this piece of property as a buffer for the benefit of the people who use the river, myself, but many people, as you've heard, use the river. And it's a beautiful segment there going through. Also as a bit of a buffer from the airport. It's like Mr. Weaver, I still don't have that property paid for. It's a lot of hard work to be paying for that piece of property. I'm really concerned, of course, about this development. I guess I have 2 questions. One question is particular to the property that I own. On this map, it says ultimate hangar development for my property, which is about 11 acres, and including the 9-acre piece adjacent to that. Is there a timeline for that? It looks like a whole lot of hangars already here. It's hard to imagine needing those pieces of property for more hangars, and how much bigger would the airport get to support that kind of hangar development or vice versa? That's my first question.
Okay, let me answer that one real quick.
Sure.
That's a really good question. The reason that we're showing it at all is because it islandizes both north and south. And if there were ever a willing seller opportunity, again, in no way, shape, or form are we promoting this as an eminent domain situation. The reality is the only way that the FAA could spend money on that property is if it's identified as potentially future property on the map. So the only reason we're showing this is if you ever decided to sell and the airport were the best bidder and you sold it to them and the FAA could then pay for it. That's the only reason it's on there. And so we had, as you know, in the last meeting, we had actually shown hangars there. The likelihood of this plan needing that property is almost zero, especially in I would say almost zero, especially if the runway's rebuilt to the north and the west. There would likely never be a need for it. And I would like to also mention too, it's hard to show on a 2-dimensional drawing what could be done 3-dimensionally with things like berms and trees. I would likely believe that the architects and engineers that would build out something like what we're showing would include some level of treed space behind, so you would have a very good camouflage of anything that is developed there. And that would be the intent. It would not to be to leave it as an industrial park look. So there would be that.
That would be important because it's hard to imagine my property gaining value in a situation where I'm boxed in by an airport and a bunch of hangars. So my second question is about the data that is being used to justify this in many ways with the 500 flights. I guess, how is that data captured, and do you have confidence in its accuracy? I mean, who's sort of overseeing its accuracy is a question I have.
Good question. That information comes from a data portal called the Traffic Flow Management System Counts. A lot of words to call it TFMSC. The TFMSC captures flight operations in two ways. The first is if you file a flight plan. So if you're flying from Sawyer County to Duluth, just say, and you're going to fly above 12,500 feet, you have to file a flight plan. And that flight plan then is registered through a system. It goes along the air traffic control system, and it is captured and recorded. It's also using radar data and ADS-B data, so real-time flight capturing. So am I confident in the answer? I would say I am confident that it's absolutely true on the low side. I would say everything that's represented here is true, and it probably misses some, because I know for 100% certain, many people who use BizJets also black out their N numbers in the system. They're allowed to, because they're very important people who don't want to be tracked. If there's much made about Elon Musk and the boy in Florida that was always capturing where he was. And so some people actually black out their N numbers. And so those are not captured. So my point is I know that the numbers represented are the minimum. There likely are more. I just can't tell you how many more. It could be ones or tens or hundreds. It's likely not thousands, but it's enough that it could be pushing you over as well.
And every flight has to be logged, no matter how long or how short. Is that?
Only IFR, instrument flight rules. If you're flying VFR or visual flight rules, it's kind of the Wild West. You go out on your own, you leave the airport, you're still being seen because you're going to squawk, and so air traffic can see you moving around, but you're not necessarily logged. Now, if you have an ADS-B receiver and you're transmitting, they will absolutely log you. There's a lot of new programs out there that are capturing all this data. We don't have a centralized database of that yet. The FAA has one. They're not publishing it yet. We can get that information from them, but they're trying to make a public-facing portal for that as well. So once that's out there, you will be able to go and look at any N number or any airplane you see, where it went, where it came from. But right now, the only aircraft I would say that you're reasonably sure you're going to capture are turbine. Most multi-engine stuff, but the single engine stuff you might miss a lot. Like Carl, you may miss his. Did you want to answer?
Yeah, I was just going to summarize it maybe in another way, that all of the data that's used in this master plan for the operations counts is coming from the FAA. It is their program. It is their data collection system. So it's not Derek watching out the window, counting and maybe adding a few here and there. It is coming from the federal government. It is from the FAA.
And I do want to say something that's going to sound weird. I think I said it last time. The FAA is not wanting to fund this program. Anybody that's asked for federal monies, they push back, they kick the can, they do everything they can to not fund something. So you have to be justified for that project solidly. So this 500 operations that comes from them, they are going to certainly make sure that that's real before they fund it. Because if it is real, they will fund it. It just takes time. Sometimes longer than others.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Good questions.
Ms. Zimmer.
Linda Zilmer, Edgewater property owner and Village of Birchwood resident. I have watched what's gone on with the airport for 20 years now, although I'm not directly affected. But it's always bothered me that the people who are most affected, who live near the airport, they're given public comment opportunities. And I think there's a demonstration that there's some listening and trying to balance or compromise. But I've always thought that if you were going to cite an airport, this is the last place you'd cite it. And every time more public dollars goes into this airport, to me, it feels like putting good money after bad. And I heard something earlier about the no action option. I've watched what's happened at the Rice Lake Airport over the years. The driving distance by car from Rice Lake to Hayward is 51 miles. It's actually shorter to go from Rice Lake to Minong at only 43 miles because that's straight up Highway 53. The Duluth International Airport to Hayward is 90 miles. Duluth to Minong is 69. And the Chippewa Valley Airport, to go from Chippewa Valley to Hayward, that's 114 miles, but it's not a bad drive. And Chippewa Valley to Minong, again, is less because it's straight up 53 and it's only 93 miles. There are a lot of other airports that could handle the C and D class. And it just, and again, we're talking about federal agencies here. It just does not seem to make sense that this sponsor, you as a county, would be liable if pilots or airplane owners wish to use this airport. They have other options. And I don't know that there's an answer to that question, but what bothers me from the county's standpoint is not so much that the FAA has tied the county's hands. It is the minimum standards ordinance that the county adopted in 2019. And here's what it says. It is the county's intent and policy to operate and develop the airport as the primary commercial aviation facility for northern Wisconsin, northeastern Minnesota, and the surrounding areas by serving all facets of aviation as described in this minimum standards ordinance. Why is the county, I mean, that just even doesn't make sense to me. If that's the county's vision, be honest about it, because to say that you won't need this expansion if that's really what the county's saying it's promoting, what is it? I think I would like to see the county address what is the true intent for this airport, because I don't think it should be developed to that level. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to speak? Hearing none, this ends our public comments. Thank you. Number 8, consideration of master plan development alternatives, recommendations to the county board, or we may table it. What is the wishes of the committee?
Well, what is the time we're looking at for this plan? I guess, this is the first time I've gotten briefed on it. So
Yeah.
we table, when do we bring it back?
We bring it back next month. It allows the public to give us more information on both sides if they so wish to do so. Yes.
So I think we talked about it, maybe touched on it at the start of the meeting, but it's a great question. And the reason we are asking for this acceptance of the preferred alternative at this point, it's important. Mike Kaufman is doing the master plan. Our firm, Becker Hoppy, we're doing the airport layout plan with Mike. So we're teamed with Mike to do this project. The airport layout plan is the final product that comes from the master plan. The airport layout plan is the one thing that we need county board approval on. So the county board chairman is going to need to put his signature or her signature on the airport layout plan saying, yes, this is the plan that the county approves. It's not saying this is the plan that the county is going to do. It's saying this is the plan that we approve that maybe someday we will do. And by having that plan, it makes you eligible for federal funding for any of the improvements that are eligible and justified that are shown on that plan. So we're at an inflection point right now. We need to know, is this the alternative that you want us to move forward with showing on the airport layout plan? Because if it's probably about 6 months worth of work for us to take these kind of colorful, non-technical figures and actually put them onto a plan set that is very technical and very detailed. And if we go through all that work to put together this very technical and very detailed plan of what is, right now kind of just colorful pictures, it will be the same thing. Everything will be the same as what you see here. It'll just have many, many, many FAA airspace services, clear zones, RPZs, runway object free area. I could go on for a long time of all of these kind of more engineering features that we are going to need to show on the plan. Well, we're contracted to do that plan one time through the FAA for Sawyer County. If we do it one time and then the county says, oh no, actually, this isn't what we want to do, we need you to go back and redo that airport layout plan. The FAA won't pay for it a second time, and the county would then be responsible for funding that themselves. So we want to make sure that the county is comfortable with this preferred alternative, recommended development. If you would like any tweaks to the recommended development before we start showing it on the airport layout plan, that's fine. One that we talked about tonight is the relocation versus closure of Airport Road. We can do one, we can do the other. We could probably show both because it could be a stepwise process where for a while it gets relocated. Maybe someday it ultimately gets closed. Maybe someday it ultimately is relocated around an entire ultimate hangar development. It really, again, I think you'd want to take into account the public's feedback and make a decision that the county would make. And maybe you all don't want to make that decision right now. Maybe you want to push it off 50 years, which is when that ultimate development, 50 years plus, when that ultimate development on that 9 acres could someday happen. Maybe it never will. But that's why this decision is important. That's why we came to you tonight, is because if you want something changed, we need to know about it before we start putting together the airport layout plan. Another product that comes from this master plan that you don't necessarily need to approve, but it's a very useful tool for you that kind of accompanies the airport layout plan, is a capital improvement plan. So we will put together what we think is a best guess of how the county could proceed with these projects if they want to, or as need dictates, to be able to move forward with these projects. What is the cost of the project going to be? How long is the project going to take? What grant funding is available? And we want to show all of that to be consistent with the airport layout plan. Well, if we put together the capital improvement plan and the airport layout plan, and we bring it to the board for approval 6 months from now, and the board says, no, this isn't what we want you to do, go back and redraw it all and go redo the whole CIP, that's not going to work well for anybody. So that's why we are asking for this acceptance of the preferred alternative or any proposed changes for future acceptance of the proposed alternatives so that we can move forward with the airport layout plan and the capital improvement plan development to go along with that. Again, I want to stress though that the capital improvement plan is a best guess as to how long these things could take. It's not committing you to that funding. It's not saying you must spend this much money these years and do these projects these years. It's a best guess that if need dictates and if the federal money is there and if, Mike has described that sometimes the county may have a choice on some of these projects. You really always have a choice. It's just really how much legal risk do you want to take? How much liability do you want to hold? And Mike has referenced some of these case studies where it's real liability. It's not just hearsay, it's real liability, it's real lawsuits. So we're trying to help set you up for success for that, and acceptance of a preferred alternative is really the step that we need to take at some point here before we can finish this master plan.
Well, I guess in listening to that, listening to everything else that's been discussed here, you guys went back and changed this plan, trying to make it better for everybody that's around that surrounding area and the river. I'm gonna make the motion to move forward from the committee here to the county.
The county board meeting.
I was gonna ask Andy, like what we did in HHS, being that we only have 3 of us here. What if we did like we did for them, not actually make the decision, but take it out of our hands and put it in the county board's hands without a recommendation?
Yeah, you can do that, but this isn't an ordinance. So you can send it to the board without a
recommendation.
without a recommendation.
I'm just saying with only 3 of us and we didn't have a,
Well, that's You know, that's an option. And it also is an option if we were to wait till next month, potentially we could have all 5 committee members, which is true. Or it could go to the full board as we have a motion on the table to let the whole full board hear it also.
You made the motion. I'll second it.
So we have a motion by Mr. Newman, second by Mr. Van Etten to pass this on to the full county board, which that meeting will be next Thursday, and I believe it's the 17th.
Correct.
Okay. Any discussion, anything that you want them to look at? Okay, all in favor of the motion? Aye. Motion against? Motion carries. Thank you. Thank you all you folks for your valuable input also. We're going to move on to number 9. Wait just a moment.
Yeah, I just want to take a 5-minute break.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, you ready to go? All right. So we're at number 9, public comment. Anybody have anything for public comment? Hearing none, thank you. Number 10, consider approval of the minutes of the previous meeting, which was 9/11.
I'll make a motion to approve minutes of 9/11.
I'll second.
Motion by Mr. Newman, second by Mr. Van Etten to approve as presented. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Maintenance Department report. Mr. Hagberg gave us a written report. Have any questions regarding the report that he has delivered to us? Hearing none, we'll move on to number 12, Highway Commissioner's report.
Thank you. So up until we started paving, crews were busy shouldering problem areas throughout the county and patching. That'll be going on after done paving until the snow flies. If you get a chance, take a ride down County Road H. We started some brushing down there. It looks really nice. The crew's been doing a great job. It's kind of what I want to get most of our county roads to look like. It's just going to take a lot of time because it costs a lot of money. We have finished up our crack sealing on the county system. We still do have some crack sealing left on the state system. We recently just got done with some road painting on County B, N, N, and E. We still have left County D and C once we complete our paving down there. Our paving operations did start last week. We finished 3.8 miles on County C. And we started County D this week. We had some plant issues with Monarch. They got it fixed, but we're on track to finish paving County D tomorrow. We still got to go back and do intersections and shoulder and paint. Intersections to take a couple days next week, and then we'll shoulder and get it painted. Moving on. We finished county mowing. We had T and O to finish. We actually finished it last week, so we're done there now too. County C Bridge update. They poured the deck on October 3rd. Project's moving along really good. They're getting ready to pour the parapets, the walls at 10-11 and or 10-10 and 10-11. As soon as they're done with that, they have left to do the approach and the approach slab and curb and gutter. And it's still on track for November 6th to be finished and completed. I recently just submitted the ARIP application for the county. We have a couple eligible roads, well, more than a couple eligible roads for this funding opportunity. I chose C from State Highway 48 to 27 because I think it's our best road with the best chance of getting funding for this. It's a 90-10 funding opportunity to build this road up to never have to road band it again. So I submitted that application, came in just over 6.8 million to do this. But again, it's 90% funded. So I believe I heard today that the ARIP selection committee would be meeting on December 3rd. So hopefully sometime after that, I should have an answer if we. No, I mean, I'm sure, I don't know all the details yet. I'm sure it's kind of similar to LRIP project. We have like 4 years to, complete it or something. I can look into that. So I did sign the contract. I got $140,000 from the state to re-roof the two domes, the one in Radisson, the one in Hayward, and then the one winter salt shed. Well, my plan was to do it in the spring, right away in the spring, but the state couldn't guarantee me the funds were gonna be available in the spring. So they wanted it done now, and I just got the contract. So I had to, got a hold of the contractor. We're able to do it. We're starting Monday, the 14th. We're gonna start in Hayward, 7 to 8 days per dome to re-roof. Then they'll go to Radisson in winter. Should be done early November.
Where's the contractors or where are they from?
Warehouse there, all, Four Seasons Roofing.
Thank you.
Yep. So the contract's for Four Seasons Roofing. They'll be starting here Monday in Hayward. And we do have 2 public involvement meetings this month. We have one on October 16th at the town of Weirgor for the D Bridge. That's going to be going in 26. And then we have another one October 23rd here at the county boardroom for County Road E North again. That'll be going in 27. Other than that, that's all I have. Thank you.
Questions? Thank you for all you do out there.
Thank you.
You want to mention maybe a little bit about LCO?
Yes, so I'm on schedule with them for another TGB meeting on October 21st. I'm going to talk a little bit about moving forward of what we're doing with the roads and ask for opportunities working together to get funding and work together to design roads within the tribal boundaries so we can have like projects ready. So when funding opportunities come through LCO that we can apply for them, Jason Weaver and I and SEH have been working together right now. And there's quite a few opportunities out there right now for tribal funding that I think the county and LCO could work together on. So.
Thank you. Moving on, number 13, Sawyer County Airport, Mr. Derek Leslie. Thank you, John.
Ooh, more airport. First off, any questions on my report come to mind right away? Obviously, it was a big night. Notable things, the airports continue to stay busy. I think unseasonably, in my opinion, just because of the nice weather we've had. We've had a fair amount of traffic. Our fuel sales are still tracking ahead of year over last year. I think all of our numbers are. So that's good. It should help on the airport budget. I keep in pretty constant communication with Andy as to what's going on. One big thing is the Wisconsin Airport Managers Association Conference was down in Madison this year. I was actually able to fly down with a couple of the people at the airport. It was nice. Saved on 6 hours of driving. The conference is very interesting. The conference, I've been going to it for many, many years. It seems like now in the last 2-3 years, we've really had a big turnover in aviation as far as, senior leadership in the state. That conference, there's probably about 500 people that are at it. Nearly every airport in the state is represented. And this year I was asked if I'd be a board member for their organization. I hosted a seminar and was a panelist for one of their discussions, and you'd love it. The discussion was dual duty, being both an FBO owner and an airport manager. And it was attended, and it was a very interesting conversation that we had with the group. Certainly not a easy thing to talk about sometimes for me. I think one of the big emphases that I made in my position is how important it is to have a really good relationship with your senior leadership at the county. Me and Andy in particular. I share with Andy probably more than Andy needs to know. Some days Andy just tells me, I think I've had enough airport for the day. So I think that was my big takeaway for other individuals in my similar situation, that having that, really important communication and being open with what's happening at the airport, I think is extremely important. Last thing is there's a hangar up for sale. You heard me talk about it earlier. Holy moly, the last month of my life has been difficult because my phone kind of seemingly never stopped ringing, people inquiring about this possible hangar for sale. I briefly talked about that at the meeting. There's a lot of people who want in, Cable in particular. Cable's turning dirt right now. I think they were going to pave today for a taxiway project at Cable for hangar development. I think they're building 14 sites, and I think 7 of the 14 already have contract leases for hangar development, just at the little Cable airport. So that's happening right now. So typically the chairman or the county board asks me, or the airport manager, the take on the situation with the hangar. I'm extremely grateful to the outgoing hangar owner. He did right. He sold his airplane. He's selling his hangar. I'd like to see that happen maybe a little bit more. The individual who is trying to acquire the hangar is very well known to us. He's got very deep ties in the aviation community. He's got 4 airplanes. I think we'd be lucky to have him. So I don't think that there'd be any reason to deny it. In my opinion, it is the smallest hangar on the field. It's 40 by 42. I don't think that it really would give any benefit to Sawyer County to try to acquire that hangar simply because of its size being the smallest hangar at the airport. I don't think it would be helpful. So you'll have to decide. That's Andy can cue in. There's a right always on every hangar transaction. There's a right to first refusal for the county. And I think that's where I'll let Andy take over.
Is there any questions about his report? Okay. I'm hearing no questions. Correct me if I'm wrong, Andy, first we have to approve the sale, and then if we so choose, we'd have to consider the first right refusal and then approve the transfer. Is that correct?
It's all included, so I apologize that these just came in today. We had to get the bill of sale, got that earlier this week, so we were able to draft. So just for your knowledge, this is what our hangar area looks like at the airport. Just to blow it up, you see the terminal building is towards the bottom here. And then you can see the brown small square is the terminal, and then our hangars. And the hangar that's being sold is out here in the corner. Like Derek said, it's one of the smaller hangars on the field. Derek and I have talked, we don't see any reason we would exercise our right of first refusal. What I passed out to you is a resolution that does a couple things. It approves the sale, it waives our right of first refusal, and it also, the other thing we have to do is that Mr. Courthalls that is transferring the lease and selling the hangar, his lease was up for renewal last year and that was missed. So we have to, or not renewal, it is a 20-year lease that expired last year. It has a 10-year option. So we need to formally amend the lease with the 10-year option that he's exercising. So that's one of the documents I gave you is the amendment to the lease to approve the renewal, and then the resolution approves the transfer to the new owner, James Robert Fox, and waives our right of first refusal in the hangar. That's a condition of the lease.
So the first thing is to renew.
Yes, you want to approve the amendment
Approve the amendment.
and send it to the board for approval?
Okay, so the first thing is to approve the amendment.
I'll make a motion to approve the amendment.
I'll second it.
So I have a motion by Mr. Van Etten, second by Mr. Newman to approve the amendment. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Yep, and the next is the resolution, which is waiving the right of first refusal and approving assignment of lease from Ron Courthalls to James Robert Fox.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
Motion by Mr. Van Etten, second by Mr. Newman to approve the first right refusal. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
So those will be put on the board agenda for approval next week. Just a couple other pieces, based on the conversations or the discussions you heard tonight and Derek's comments. So one of the concerns that's come up previously, and I've heard some public comment regarding The hangars have to be used for an aeronautical use. The FAA has relaxed that language in the over last many years. So as long as they have a active airplane stored in their hangar, they can put other things in there with it. And Derek does try to monitor that. Just as, just to kind of close the loop, we did do a quick check on Mr. Fox. He actually, I think, owns 3 airplanes. Yeah, they're registered to him, so we're not worried about him using it for aeronautical use. And just to clarify too, because of the questions that have come up as a result of the master plan. So we actually lease, these are ground leases. We lease the land, the hangar owner, or our lessee actually owns the building that is on the land. Some people didn't realize that's how it works, but that's what the lease is for.
So with these guys not having aircraft in their hangars, how do you enforce something like that?
If it's, you want me to take this? My illegal?
I'd probably better.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, the FBO would like that there be an airplane in there that flies every day and takes fuel. So some of them might just have airplanes that are parked in there that don't fly much, as long as they have a, yes. Yeah, and if they don't, then we've talked about if they don't, we can, send them a communication saying we believe you're out of compliance with your lease. The new leases that we've been putting out have very, I would say, strict language in there, referencing FAA guidelines for aeronautical use. And then we would give them, they would have a time to find an aeronautical, find somebody to put a plane in there or lease it. And that's why I know, I've heard, comments that some of these hangar owners just use them to store their toys. True statement, some of them do. And if we were able, it would take, if we ever had somebody that was not using it for an aeronautical use, it'd be fairly easy for them to come into compliance. And if we really wanted to pursue it, we could force them to sell the hangar to somebody else, but I think that would be by the time we go through that effort, they would find an aeronautical use for it. I don't know that we have anybody, chances are we maybe have a hangar that's empty that could be used more often.
Correct. So that's why I made the comments, particularly to Mr. Corthals, how much we appreciate it when guys age out and or sell their aircraft, that they turn it over to the new generation. It's even more so important at our airport with no more hangar options. So
if we ever hear of somebody not using it the way it's supposed to or not having aeronautical use, Derek, we've talked that we'll have to send a communication telling them of that, and we can ask to inspect the hangar to verify if they are using it for aeronautical use.
I have access to pretty much all but one hangar at the airport. I go in and out of regularly, and the one that I don't, I'm not really worried about. So I keep tabs on it. Like Andy said, there's certainly some limited or no use situations, but they're not being used. The ones that are not being used frequently are also not being used by something else. They are simply sitting open.
Okay, we're gonna move on to letter C. Carl, you're gonna be at the meeting next Thursday night?
I could try to join virtually. I did agree to my wife to be on kid duty next Thursday. I got a 2-year-old and a 4-month-old at home, and she has something going on that I'm supposed to watch the kids that night, but I will see what I can do to get out of that.
If you brought the kids, we'd probably get out quicker.
Good point. I actually flew up with them today, so they're up here with me right now.
Thank you, Carl. Thank you for all you've done. Andy, do we need a closed session?
We will, yes.
Okay. So we need a motion to go.
I'll make a motion, to go into closed session.
I'll second.
Motion by Mr. Van Ness, second by Mr. Newman to go into closed session pursuant Wisconsin statute 19.851E to enter into closed session for the purpose of deliberating and negotiating a purchase of public property, investing in public funds, or conducting other specific public businesses, whenever competitive by bargaining reason of the airport manager contract. Need a roll call vote? Hold it. Need a roll call vote?
Mr. Van Etten?
Yes.
Mr. Newman?
Yes.
Mr. Kinsley?
Yes. We're in closed session. Do you have to shut anything down, Andy?
Yep, hang on.
That's what the rules say, you have to.
We're gonna make a motion in open session.
We're out of closed session. Is anybody else out there, Derek?
Just Carl, that's it.
Ms. Zilmer left.
Oh, yeah, I don't think there's anybody else out there, just Carl. Yeah. On his ride back to the airport, so.
All right.
I'm gonna move to approve the amendment and reinstatement of the airport management agreement for an additional 5-year period.
I'll second.
Motion by Mr. Newman, second by Mr. Van Ness to approve the 5-year term agreement with the airport
Can you
manager.
just amend the motion to as compensation as presented?
To amend the compensation as presented.
Presented is what we discussed.
You get that?
That's it.
You get that?
I don't know.
Yes, no, we had a motion. Okay, we had a motion and a second, and then we roll call. And then we voted. Okay, so then we're in open session. Read me what you got written down for the contract, please.
Motion to approve the 5-year term and
It'll work, Andy?
Here, I'll give her,
Here, she's got mine.
okay.
So staple that to the closed session. We have the motion and the second. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Board appointment committee updates. That's anybody on any other committees that wish to speak at this time. Hearing none. Future agenda items. I'm sure we'll have a lot. But we keep rolling. But if there's anything you guys want on the committee or on the, bring it forward and we'll certainly try to get it there. Correspondence reports, conferences, anything else? Andy, you got anything else?
No, the only thing, I mean, some of the things you heard as far as having legal look at the airport and the cost of shutting, like what we have to pay. I'm not gonna pursue that unless the board directs me to, like.
No, I don't think we have to.
Well, that's another thing why I pushed to move that forward, because I didn't want to all of a sudden we have to do another plan or whatever, then the county's on the hook for that whole thing. We have to pay, and they're only gonna cover it one time.
It's fresh in everyone's memory now.
That's enough discussion then.
Here's a question for you, Andy. When we're at the full county board, is Mike's comments, opening lines available somehow, some way that we can present that to the full board?
Is what he said tonight?
Yeah.
Yeah, presentation. You send that to the county board prior to. the
Oh,
meeting.
like, yeah, we can get that. Like his PowerPoint?
Yeah.
Well, the PowerPoint and how he talked.
Yeah, I can see if we can clip, well, I definitely know we can clip that video part out. And either, if you want to play at the board meeting, we can play it, or I can send it to the board, either one.
I'd rather send it to the board and have it listened to it prior.
Will they listen to it prior?
Well, that's the thing, I suppose. You might have to have it just in case someone asks for it.
Yep.
Okay. And I anticipate a big crowd at the county board meeting because we have the budget and we also have the airport and we have,
TRH.
yeah. So it's gonna be a long meeting, but we'll get through it.
We thought maybe one of those things would go to the November meeting, but
I kind of thought this would, but all right. Anything else? Meeting adjourned. Thank you for your valuable time.